We've now come to our Friday feature Movie Spotlight, where we review some of the latest releases at the Korean box office and online. And joining me in the studio today is a film critic, Jason Bechervaise, once again on his own this week. Jason, hello, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good. I'm flying solo again, all for a good cause.
Yes, sir. For the first time in a long while, we start with a local release because we finally have a major commercial release of a Korean film. It is The Roundup, aka 범죄도시 2 in Korean, and it stars Dong Seok. The local film industry is relying on his broad shoulders to put in the crowds once again. Jason, what can you tell us about this film?
Yes, that's right. So, this is a sequel to the sleeper hit, The Outlaws, in which Dong Seok, aka Don Lee, plays a kind of Dirty Harry cop, except with less grit and a lot more humor and charm, in bringing down the bad guys using literally whatever means necessary to do so. And yes, utilizing his, gargantuan biceps. In the film, he took down, along with his team, a trio of Chinese-Korean criminals that's actually based on a real-life incident in Seoul in the mid-2000s. And the film was directed by Kang Yun-sung and sold 6.8 million tickets in 2017. It wasn't expected to perform as well as it did. It was released during the Chuseok window. Now, this new film is more ambitious, also, of course, starring Dong Seok. And his team now, they head to, well, I say his team, him and his boss head to Vietnam. Now, this takes place, I think, in 2008, so just a couple of years after the setting of the first film, and they chase down, they're looking for a few suspects, and they then try to track down this very notorious criminal played by Son Seok-gyu, who plays the villain in this film, and that's all you really need to know. I mean, it spends, I guess, the first half of the film mainly set in Vietnam, and the second half of the film is set in Seoul, mainly, Seoul and the surrounding area. It also features Chae Gui-ha, Ha Dong-wan, and Park Ju-won, who return to their respective roles. So yeah, similar concepts, and never taken too seriously, despite its kind of darkish tone. And apparently, there's already a third film in the making,
right.
So there's been some casting announced, and there are plans actually to make up to 8 films.
Up to 8 films?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So the sequel, though, takes him on the road to Vietnam, essentially. You said last week the word of mouth is strong following its premiere. Jason, what do you think of it, though?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I had some issues with it. It's certainly not without its faults. I wasn't so keen on some of the scenes in Vietnam. It just kind of loses a bit of its pace, and that being said, though, it is worth noting that this film was shot during the pandemic, and clearly they were faced with with restrictions, so it would have been difficult. That being said, though, there's this really cool action set piece set in a block of flats in Vietnam. The first scene where you have the protagonist and antagonist kind of fighting against each other, and it is more ambitious. It doesn't quite. I mean, it's a different cinematographer, so the aesthetic looks different. That being said, though, the set pieces are absolutely fantastic. They're so gripping, and dare I say it, they're actually a little bit experimental. Now, Dong Seok brings his charm, but he also brings his kind of Marvel flair. So this is Dong Seok kind of post-Marvel, post the first film, and he's even stronger, he's even bigger, and he's even more formidable, and it does get a little bit ridiculous, but at that point you don't care. He's like throwing people out of through windows, and it gets a lot of fun, and I had a really good time watching this film, particularly in the second half, where it really gets going.
Well, I'm glad it didn't disappoint that it was fun. I really enjoyed the first one as well, so I'm glad the sequel didn't drop the ball, especially because it's been picked up by quite a lot of international distributors, I believe over 130 countries. So I'm glad they'll be able to enjoy Ma Dong-seok's charms and his humongous biceps, as you said. Now we have the Roundup playing in Korea. The Cannes Film Festival kicked off this week with 3 Korean films in the main selection. That's A Broker, Decision to Leave, and Hunt, and another in the Cannes Critics Sidebar called Next Soy. So would you say that we're seeing Korean cinema making a comeback on both the local and international level?
Absolutely. And finally, I've been going to the cinema, every week during the pandemic, and the cinemas, my local multiplex has largely been deserted. And I've earned lots of points and get lots of free tickets as a result of that. But I've really missed watching films with audiences. And this week I watched a Korean film in a theatre that was 2/3 full, and it felt fantastic. Right. And the film sold over 400,000 tickets on its first day on Wednesday. It's looking to perform very well indeed. And yes, internationally as well, we've got the Cannes Film Festival. So, the timing I guess it's quite fortuitous, but yeah, I think it just underscores, the resilience of the film industry. You can never underestimate Korean cinema kind of mounting a comeback. There's a lot of kind of pessimism in the late 2000s when the industry kind of entered a recession period, but it fought back, and to the point where it's selling over 100,000 or pulling in over 100,000 viewers a year. These are admissions to Korean films. So I think there were doubts, but I think there is certainly going to be a lot more optimism as a result of this film performing well. We have quite a number of Korean films that are being released over the next few weeks. It's going to be like London buses.
Indeed, it's been a long couple of years, but finally it seems like we have reached the end of that tunnel, and we're going to see a revival of sorts for the Korean film industry. Okay, let's move on to our second film now. It's an international release and something more somber, shall we say. It is the US drama Mass, starring Jason Isaacs. It's also simply called Mass in Korean. The film also hit screens on Wednesday. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, this one's a bit tricky to talk about in a way because I don't want to give too much away. I went in stone cold. I didn't know too much about the plot, and I'm glad I didn't. And it really hit me very powerfully in ways I wasn't expecting. So I'm going to try and do my best and review the film, but without giving away too much in terms of spoilers.
Sure.
Anyway, it's directed by Fran Kranz in what is an extremely impressive feature debut. He's a Yale graduate, done quite a bit of acting. He's been in Donnie Darko, Training Day, Cabin in the Woods. He often in very small or minor or supporting roles. He also wrote this film. He co-produced it as well. Clearly a talent to look out for. He's only 40 years of age. The film premiered in Sundance in 2021. Now, it's mainly set in a room in a Catholic church, and we see this room being set up for 2 married couples that come, and we don't know why initially. Clearly something happened 6 years ago, and a few minutes in we get a few clues as to what happened. There's a reference to what Obama once said, and at which point I kind of figured out there was an instant, figured out kind of what happened all those years ago. And we have these 2 kind of couples, and they've both gone through an incredible ordeal, and they have to talk through their grievances. They want to understand each other. There's also friction not only between the two different couples, but also between the husband and wife as well.
Okay.
It's an incredibly tragic event that happened, and I think it speaks to what's happening in America right now, what's happened in America over the last few years. And it's just a superb superbly written and directed drama. It stars Reed Birney, Anne Dowd, Jason Isaacs, and he's terrific as ever, and Martha Plimpton as well.
Okay, so it seems to have really won you over.
Absolutely.
What was so notable about it that made you take notice and consider the filmmaker as someone of such talent?
Yeah, I mean, it's largely set in this room. It feels quintessentially American as well. This church in what seems like a very small town. We don't see much of the town at all. And it starts. We see this. It's set in this room. And we see someone working at the church setting up this particular room for these two couples. And it feels very kind of almost quite simple. And yet what these couples go through is anything but simple. It's incredibly moving, complex, and the acting is absolutely terrific. And that's partly, we've got terrific actors here, but also the writing is so good as well. There's a lot I want to say but I don't want to give too much away. So,
sure. Is it cinematic? You say it's all set in one room.
Well, this is the thing. In terms of cinematography, I wouldn't say it is particularly cinematic, but the atmosphere that it generates. And, we've seen these films over the years that are set in this one location, and often it feels like a bit of a gimmick. But here it's anything but. It's just, it's a real interesting kind of examination and study of grief, of contemporary America, and it's absolutely fantastic.
How do you think it'll do in Korea? Some of the themes sound like it might not connect so well with a Korean audience.
Perhaps, but it was interesting to see that some of the screenings in one of the cinemas I was looking at were actually sold out. So I think for those who do actually, it won't be shown on a huge number of screens, but I think those who check it out, yes, it is. It does deal with American politics to some extent, but also some of the themes it deals with are themes, I think, that are universal as well. So I think it'll resonate here. And so far, the reaction seems pretty positive.
Interesting. Once again, it's called The Mass. That's where we'll leave it for this week's Movie Spotlight. Jason, thank you as ever for coming in and giving us your reviews, and we'll see you again next time.
Take care.